The water started draining the moment his dog clawed at a spot no one had ever questioned. The shovel hit something solid, and the sound didn't match mud. Raymond froze, breath shallow, as cold water slipped past his fingers in a thin, steady pull. Bruno stood locked in place, ears forward, staring at the same spot like it was alive. The ground beneath them shifted, just enough to feel wrong. The mud didn't move, but it didn't sit still either. Raymond Hale stood at the broken fence line with his hands resting on the top rail, eyes fixed on the stretch of land below. 28 acres of it, sloping shallow into a basin that never quite dried. The water wasn't deep enough to be a pond, but it wasn't shallow enough to ignore. It held its shape like something breathing slow beneath the surface. The locals called it Dead Hollow Ground. He'd heard that name 3 times in the last hour. Once from the man who handed him the deed, once from a kid leaning against a pickup, and once from an older woman who didn't bother lowering her voice. "Nothing grows there," she'd said. "Hasn't for as long as I can remember." Raymond hadn't answered. He rarely did unless there was a reason. The wind moved across the hollow in a low sweep, bending the brown reeds just enough to show the direction of it. West to east. The water followed the same line, barely visible, just a shift in color where the surface tension broke. Behind him, gravel crunched once. Bruno didn't turn. The German shepherd stood a few yards to Raymond's left, body angled toward the center of the basin. Ears forward, tail still. He wasn't watching Raymond. He wasn't watching the road. He was watching something out there, something fixed, something that didn't change even when everything else did. "Go on," the man from the county said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "You'll get used to it. Most folks don't stay long enough to bother." Raymond nodded once, not looking back. The man lingered another second, then walked off toward his truck, boots scraping against the loose stones. The engine turned over, coughed, then settled into a low idle before fading down the road. Silence came back quick out here. Not empty silence, layered. Wind, distant water, something moving under the surface where it shouldn't have been. Raymond stepped over the fence. The ground gave slightly under his weight, but didn't sink. Not here. He moved forward in a straight line, boots placing careful, deliberate steps. The way he'd learned years ago, when the ground itself could decide whether you made it across. Bruno followed, but not beside him. The dog angled off, cutting a different path, diagonal, purposeful. He stopped about 30 yards out, right at the edge of a patch where the water looked darker, thicker. He lowered his head, sniffed once, then stood completely still again. Raymond watched him. Didn't call him back, didn't whistle. He just stood there, reading the land the same way he used to read terrain maps, looking for patterns, breaks, anything that didn't belong. The surface shifted again, just enough to catch the light. Not random, directional. Raymond exhaled slowly through his nose. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "I see it."
Stay sharp, buddy.
Bruno's ear twitched, but he didn't move. Raymond stayed out there longer than he meant to. Long enough for the light to change, for the shadows from the tree line to stretch across the hollow like fingers reaching into it. By the time he turned back toward the fence, the air had cooled, carrying that damp edge that settled into your bones if you let it. Bruno walked ahead of him on the way back, glancing once over his shoulder as if making sure Raymond was still there. He always did that. At the truck, Raymond wiped his boots on the grass before climbing in. The cab smelled faintly of oil and old leather. He sat there for a moment with the engine off, hands resting on the wheel, eyes unfocused. A drop of water hit metal somewhere. Sharp, hollow. Another one followed. Drip, drip. The sound tightened something in his chest before he even realized it. Concrete ceiling, low light, the smell of dust and cordite baked into the air. A radio crackling with half words. Someone shouting coordinates that didn't line up with what he was seeing. Raymond's hand moved before his mind caught up, fingers curling like they were reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. Then Bruno shifted in the passenger seat. Just a small movement, a weight adjustment. Nails clicking once against the floorboard. Raymond blinked. The truck came back. The hollow was outside the windshield again. The trees, the fading light. No concrete. No radio. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Easy, he muttered. Bruno's head turned slightly, eyes on him now instead of the land. Raymond nodded once, like that settled it. He turned the key. The engine started on the second try. Darnell's Feed and Supply sat at the edge of town like it always had, the paint on the sign fading just enough to make the letters look older than they were. The same trucks were parked out front, same men leaning against the same doors, talking about the same things they'd been talking about for years. Raymond pulled in without hurry. Bruno stayed in the truck, watching. Inside, the bell over the door gave a tired ring as Raymond stepped in. The air carried that mix of feed grain, oil, and dust that never quite left your clothes once it settled in. Conversation dipped for half a second, then picked back up. Not quieter, just angled differently. "That him?" someone said near the counter, not bothering to lower his voice. "Has to be," another replied. "He's the one bought that swamp." A low chuckle moved through the group. Raymond walked past them without turning his head. He moved along the shelves, picking up what he needed. Stakes, line, a measuring tape, a heavy-duty shovel with a reinforced handle. Practical things, not hopeful ones. At the counter, he set them down one by one. The man behind the register glanced at the pile, then at Raymond. "You planning to build something out there?" he asked, tone neutral but eyes curious. Raymond reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded stack of cash. "Something like that." Behind him, a chair scraped. "You know that land don't drain," a voice said. Older, confident in a way that came from never having to question itself. Raymond didn't turn. "Been sitting wet since before I bought my place," the man continued. "County tried fixing it back in the 90s. Pumps, trenching. Didn't take." Another voice cut in, lighter. "Hell, he might be building himself a fishing hole." Laughter this time. Not loud, but enough. Raymond slid the cash across the counter. The register opened with a ding. "You'll need a receipt?" the clerk asked. Raymond shook his head. "No." He gathered the supplies into a paper sack, lifting it without strain. As he turned to leave, the older man spoke again. "Name's Nathan Crowley," he said. "If you decide you don't want that land after all, I'd be willing to take it off your hands. Save you the trouble." Raymond paused just long enough to acknowledge the words. Then he nodded once. "I'll keep that in mind." He walked out without looking back. Outside, Bruno was already standing in the bed of the truck, front paws braced against the cab, watching the door. Raymond set the bag down, climbed in, and shut the door. The engine turned over, steady this time. As he pulled away, the voices faded behind him, replaced again by the quiet of the mountains and the low hum of the road under the tires. Bruno shifted, then settled, but his gaze stayed fixed ahead. toward the hollow, toward that same point in the water where nothing seemed to move, and yet something was. Raymond didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Not yet. The road back to the hollow wound through low hills and thinning trees, the kind that let the wind cut straight through without slowing. Raymond kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the gear shift, eyes moving, not just forward, but to the edges. Tree line, ditch, ridge above. Bruno didn't lie down this time. He stayed upright in the passenger seat, head angled slightly toward the window, tracking movement that wasn't obvious. A flick of grass. A bird breaking low across the field. Things most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking for them. Raymond noticed. He always had. The truck crested a small rise, and for a moment the hollow came back into view, stretched out below like a shallow bowl catching whatever the sky decided to give it. The light had shifted again. Late afternoon now. The water held more shadow than reflection. Raymond slowed, not stopping, just enough to take it in. Then he drove on. The house he rented sat half a mile from the land, tucked just off a narrow dirt road that turned to mud if it rained too hard. It wasn't much. One room, a small kitchen, a porch that leaned a few inches lower on one side. It was enough. Raymond parked, cut the engine, and sat for a moment before moving. The quiet here was different from the hollow. Less layered. Less watchful. Bruno jumped down first, landing soft, already scanning. Raymond grabbed the bag from Darnell's and stepped out. The porch creaked under his weight, the boards dry enough to hold, but not quiet about it. Inside, the air carried the faint smell of old wood and something that had once been coffee. He set the supplies down on the table, took off his jacket, and hung it on the back of a chair. For a few seconds, he just stood there, listening. Nothing moved inside the house. No pipes ticking. No loose boards shifting. Just the wind brushing past the siding. Safe. Or close enough. He walked to the sink, turned the tap. The water came out thin, uneven. He let it run anyway, rinsing his hands slowly, watching the dirt swirl down the drain. Drip. The sound came again, not from the faucet, behind him. Raymond froze. Drip. Concrete, low ceiling. The sound echoing just enough to make it hard to place. Someone whispering over comms. A word cut off halfway. Contact. Raymond's shoulders tightened. His breathing slowed, controlled, but shallow. His head turned slightly, not enough to expose himself, just enough to listen. Bruno stepped closer. No bark, no growl, just presence. The dog's body pressed lightly against Raymond's leg, grounding, steady. Not pulling him out, just holding him in place long enough for the moment to pass. Raymond blinked. The kitchen came back into focus. The sink, the window, the thin line of water still running. He reached out and shut it off. Silence returned. Yeah, he said quietly. I know. Bruno stepped back, as if that settled it. Morning came early in the mountains. Raymond was already awake before the light broke the tree line. He sat on the edge of the bed, boots on, hands resting on his knees, eyes open but not moving much. He hadn't slept long. He rarely did. Outside, the air held that sharp edge that came just before sunrise, the kind that made sound carry farther than it should. Raymond stepped out onto the porch. Bruno followed. They stood there for a minute, both facing the same direction, toward the hollow. No words. Then Raymond stepped down, grabbed the measuring line from the truck, and started walking. The land felt different in the morning. Colder, firmer in places. The water still there, but quieter, like it hadn't decided what it wanted to do yet. Raymond moved along the edge first, marking points with small wooden stakes. Every 10 feet, sometimes less. He worked methodically. No wasted motion. Each step placed, each measurement noted in the small waterproof notebook he pulled from his jacket. Numbers, distances, slight changes in elevation he could feel more than see. Bruno ranged ahead, then doubled back, then cut across again. Not random. Never random. At the far edge, near a line of older trees, Bruno stopped. Same spot. Same posture. Head low. Body still. Raymond didn't go to him right away. He stood where he was, watching. The water there looked thicker, darker. Not deeper, just denser, like it had been sitting longer than the rest. Raymond stepped forward, slow, testing the ground before putting full weight down. It held. He crouched, pressing his palm into the mud. Cold, saturated. But underneath, something firmer. He scraped at the surface with his fingers, pushing aside the top layer. Water seeped back in almost immediately. But not evenly. There was a direction to it. A pull. Raymond wiped his hand on his jeans, then looked up at Bruno. The dog hadn't moved. Just watched him. "Yeah," Raymond said again, quieter this time. Behind them, a truck engine sounded on the road. Raymond straightened, didn't turn right away. The engine slowed, gravel crunching as it pulled to a stop near the fence line. Raymond turned then, slow, deliberate. Nathan Crowley stepped out of his truck like he owned the ground he was standing on. Tall, broad, the kind of man who didn't rush because he never had to. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, looking out over the hollow. "Well," Nathan called, voice carrying easy across the distance. "I was wondering when you'd start digging yourself in." Raymond didn't answer. He stayed where he was, one hand resting loosely at his side, the other still holding the notebook. Nathan pushed off the truck and walked a few steps closer, boots sinking slightly in the softer ground near the fence. "You planning to turn that into something?" he went on. "Or just measuring how bad it is?" Bruno shifted, just enough to place himself between Raymond and the direction of the voice. Not aggressive, but not casual either. Nathan noticed. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good dog," he said. "Knows when something's off." Raymond closed the notebook. "Something like that." Nathan studied him for a moment, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You know that land don't hold value," he said. "Not like this. County's been over it. I've been over it. Everyone who's tried has walked away." Raymond nodded once. "I heard." Nathan let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "Then you also heard I'm willing to buy it. Still am. Save you the trouble before you get too far into something that won't pay back." Raymond looked past him, toward the ridgeline, then back. "I'm not selling." Nathan's smile didn't change. "Not yet," he said. A beat passed. Wind moved through the reeds again, bending them just enough to show that same direction. West to east. Nathan glanced out over the land one more time, then back at Raymond. "You'll figure it out," he said. "Or you won't." He turned, walked back to his truck, and climbed in without another word. The engine started, louder this time, and pulled away down the road. Raymond watched until the sound faded. Then he turned back to the spot Bruno had marked. The water shifted again. Same direction, same pull. Raymond stepped closer. Bruno didn't move. Not yet. The water around his paws barely rippled, but the surface tension wasn't right. It held too tight in some places, too loose in others, like a skin stretched uneven across something underneath. Raymond stepped closer, slow, placing each foot with care. The ground here looked no different from the rest, same dull sheen, same scattered reeds, but the weight shifted differently. Subtle, enough to matter. He stopped beside Bruno. For a moment, neither of them moved. Raymond crouched, lowering himself onto one knee. The fabric of his jeans darkened where it met the damp soil. He pressed his hand down again, deeper this time, fingers pushing through the top layer of silt. Cold. Not just surface cold, deeper. Like something moving under it, pulling the temperature down. He watched the water as he lifted his hand. It didn't just fill back in, it drew. A slow, quiet movement, barely visible unless you knew what you were looking for. The water leaned toward a direction that didn't match the slope of the land. Raymond's eyes narrowed slightly. "All right," he murmured. Bruno's ear twitched. Raymond reached into his jacket, pulled out the small notebook, and flipped it open. The pages were already marked with rough lines, angles, measurements, notes written in tight, controlled script. He added another mark, a small arrow. Not where the land dipped, where the water moved. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to flatten the shadows. The hollow looked almost ordinary from a distance. A patch of land holding more water than it should, nothing more. Up close, it told a different story. Raymond moved along the perimeter, driving stakes into the ground at intervals, stringing line between them. Each section measured. Each change in elevation noted, not by eye alone, but by feel, by how his boots sank or didn't. He didn't rush. He never rushed. In another life, that had kept men alive. Here, it was the only way to understand what this place was trying to do. Bruno ranged ahead, then circled back, always returning to that same general area. Not the exact point every time, but close enough to draw a pattern. Raymond watched him as much as he watched the land. When Bruno paused, Raymond paused. When Bruno shifted direction, Raymond adjusted his line. No commands, no need. They moved like that for hours, one reading the ground, the other confirming it. At the far eastern edge of the property, the land rose slightly before dropping off toward a shallow creek that ran along the road. The difference wasn't dramatic, a few inches at most, but inches mattered. Raymond stepped down toward the creek bank, boots sliding slightly on the loose gravel. He crouched again, this time at the edge where the hollow should have been draining. The water here was clearer, moving faster, but not fast enough. He reached into the current, feeling the flow. It wasn't pulling from the hollow the way it should. There was resistance. Upstream. Something holding it back. Raymond stood, turning slowly, tracing the line back toward where Bruno had been marking. His gaze followed the slight rise in the land, a barely noticeable ridge that cut across the hollow like a seam. He exhaled. "Not random," he said quietly. Bruno appeared beside him, as if he'd been waiting for that conclusion. Raymond looked down at the dog. "You've been seeing this the whole time, haven't you?" Bruno didn't answer. He didn't need to. They worked through the afternoon, mapping the hollow in sections. Raymond marked depth changes with small flags, noting where the ground held firm and where it shifted under pressure. By the time the light began to soften, the notebook held more than lines. It held a pattern. The water wasn't trapped because there was too much of it. It was trapped because it didn't have a clean way out. Raymond stood at the center of the hollow, turning slowly, eyes moving over the stakes, the lines, the subtle changes in color and texture. In his mind, it shifted from a field to a map. He could see the flow now, where it should start, where it stalled, where it tried to push through and failed. A channel. Not wide, not deep. Just enough. Bruno moved ahead again, stopping at the same darker patch near the trees. Raymond walked toward him. This time he didn't hesitate. He drove the tip of the shovel into the ground. The metal hit something solid beneath the mud with a dull, hollow thud. Raymond froze. He pulled the shovel back, then drove it in again, a few inches to the side. Same sound. Not rock. Not root. Something shaped. Bruno lowered his head, sniffing close to the spot, then stepped back slightly, giving Raymond space. Raymond set the shovel aside and dropped to both knees. He dug with his hands this time, pushing through the top layer, ignoring the cold, the grit working into his skin. The mud gave way slowly, then faster. Water seeped in, but it didn't fill evenly. It pulled toward a narrow gap forming beneath his fingers. Raymond brushed away more dirt. A flat edge appeared. Stone. Cut, not natural. He cleared another section. More stone. Set in a line. A structure. Buried. Raymond sat back on his heels, breathing steady but deeper now. Bruno watched him, ears forward, waiting. Raymond wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving streaks of dark mud across the fabric. He looked out over the hollow, then back down at the stone. "Yeah," he said again, quieter than before. "That's what you were trying to tell me." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of a truck passing on the road. Raymond didn't look up this time. His focus stayed on the ground, on the line of stone disappearing back into the mud, on the place where the water wanted to go but couldn't. Not anymore. Not yet. But it had once, and that was enough. Raymond stayed there longer than he needed to, kneeling in the mud with both hands resting on the exposed stone. The edges were worn but deliberate. Not random rock. Not something nature had left behind. Placed. Engineered. He traced the line with his fingers, following it as far as the mud would let him without digging further. It angled slightly, subtle but consistent. Not matching the current lay of the land, which meant the land had changed. Or been changed. Raymond stood slowly, knees stiff from the cold. He looked out over the hollow again, this time not as it was, but as it had been. Water moving clean, directed, controlled, not trapped. His gaze shifted toward the creek line, then back to the buried stone. "Blocked," he said quietly. Bruno stood, ears forward, watching the same direction. Raymond picked up the shovel, drove it into the ground once more, not to dig, but to mark the spot. He left it standing there, angled slightly, visible from a distance. A reference point. He stepped back, committing the location to memory. Then he turned and walked toward the truck. Bruno followed without hesitation this time. By the time Raymond pulled onto the main road, the sun had dipped low enough to throw long shadows across the hills. The light cut sideways, sharp and narrow, making everything look more defined than it really was. He didn't drive fast. Didn't need to. His mind was already moving ahead. channel, outlet, elevation. He could feel the difference in his head before he measured it. The way the water leaned, the way the ground resisted. It wasn't random failure. It was a system that had been interrupted. Raymond reached the turnoff toward his place just as another truck came up behind him, faster than it should have been on that road. Headlights flared in his rear-view mirror. Too close. Raymond's hand shifted on the wheel, subtle adjustment. He didn't brake hard, didn't signal, just eased off enough to let the truck pass if it wanted to. It didn't. The headlights stayed there, tight, pressing. Bruno's posture changed instantly. No sound, no bark, just a shift forward, muscles tightening, eyes fixed on the mirror. Raymond glanced once. White pickup, mud splattered, no markings. He let the truck sit there for another second. Then he slowed further. The truck behind him jerked slightly, then swerved past in a burst of engine noise and gravel spray. As it passed, Raymond caught a glimpse of the driver, just enough to see a face turned forward, not looking at him. Not curious, not friendly. Intent. The truck sped ahead, disappearing around the bend without slowing. Raymond didn't follow. He turned onto his road, gravel crunching under his tires, and drove the rest of the way in silence. The porch creaked the same way it had that morning. The house felt smaller now. Not unsafe, just noticed. Raymond set the shovel and tools against the wall outside instead of bringing them in. Less clutter. Clear lines. Inside, he moved through the space without turning on the overhead light. The last of the daylight filtered through the window, enough to see by. He set the notebook on the table, opened it, and studied the lines he'd drawn. Then he added one more. A clean cut. From the buried stone to the creek. He measured it by eye first. Rough estimate. 60 feet, maybe a little more. Not a trench, a channel. He closed the notebook. Bruno settled near the door, body angled toward it, not fully relaxed. Raymond noticed. "Yeah," he said. He didn't reach for the light. Didn't sit down. He walked to the window instead, standing just off to the side where he could see out without being seen. The road was empty. Trees still. Nothing moved. But the feeling didn't go away. It was fully dark when the knock came. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm enough to carry through the wood. Raymond didn't move right away. Bruno was already up, silent, positioned slightly ahead of him but not blocking the door. Waiting. Raymond stepped forward, slow, stopping just short of the frame. "Yeah?" "County office," a voice said from outside. Younger, controlled. Raymond opened the door just enough to see. Eli Turner stood on the porch, hands visible, posture neutral but alert. He wasn't dressed like he'd been in the office. No clipboard, no folder. Just a jacket and boots that had seen some use. "You got a minute?" Eli asked. Raymond studied him for a second, then stepped back, opening the door wider. Eli stepped inside, glancing once at Bruno, then back to Raymond. "Didn't mean to drop in late," he said, "but I heard you've been working that parcel." Raymond didn't answer. Eli shifted his weight, looking around the small room before settling his gaze back on Raymond. "I wrote the report on that land," he said. "Said it wasn't viable." "I heard." Eli nodded once. "Still stands," he added, "as far as the county's concerned." Raymond said nothing. Eli took a breath. But I also heard you're digging. Raymond's eyes didn't change. Looking, he said. Eli's mouth tightened slightly. Same difference if it turns into something that affects drainage. That land ties into the county ditch system. You start cutting into it, you could shift water onto someone else's property. Raymond leaned one shoulder against the wall, casual on the surface. Water's already shifting, he said. Just not where it should. Eli watched him, measuring. You find something? He asked. Raymond didn't answer, didn't lie, just let the question sit. Bruno's ears flicked once. Eli followed the movement, then looked back at Raymond. You planning to file for any work permits? He asked. No. That's going to be a problem. Raymond pushed off the wall. Only if I'm wrong. Eli held his gaze for a long second. And if you're not? Raymond shrugged, slight. Then it won't be. Silence stretched between them. Not hostile, not friendly. Just balanced. Eli exhaled slowly. I'm not here to shut you down, he said. Not yet. But if water starts moving where it shouldn't, I'll have to. Raymond nodded once. Fair. Eli turned toward the door, then paused. People are talking, he added without looking back. About you. About that land. Raymond didn't respond. Eli opened the door, stepped out into the night, and pulled it closed behind him. The sound of his boots faded down the porch steps, then onto the gravel. Then gone. Raymond stood there for a moment longer, listening. When he was sure the road was clear, he moved back to the table and opened the notebook again. His finger traced the line he'd drawn. From the buried stone to the creek. 60 feet, maybe a little more. He picked up a pencil and wrote one word beside it. Cut. Bruno settled back down near the door, but his head stayed up, eyes half open, watching. Raymond closed the notebook. Tomorrow he would start. Not digging blindly, not guessing. Deliberate. Measured. Like everything else that mattered. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the faint sound of water moving somewhere it hadn't before. Not much, but enough. Raymond was already outside before the first light touched the ridge. The air carried that early cold that sat low to the ground, hugging the hollow like it didn't want to leave. His breath came out in slow, steady clouds as he crossed the field, boots finding the same path he'd marked the day before. Bruno moved ahead, no leash, no command. Same route, same point. The dog didn't hesitate this time. He went straight to the darker patch near the trees and stopped, head low, watching the ground like it might move if he looked away. Raymond didn't call him back. He set the shovel down beside the one he'd left the day before, checked the line in his notebook one more time, then stepped into the marked area. The mud had settled overnight. Not dried, just shifted. He could feel it under his boots. He drove the shovel in. Metal met resistance. Not soft resistance. Defined. Raymond leaned into it, pushing deeper, then pulled back and cleared the top layer with his hands again, faster this time. The cold didn't matter. The grit didn't matter. What mattered was the shape emerging beneath. Stone. Flat. Placed. He widened the opening, working methodically now, clearing a section about 2 feet across. The more he uncovered, the clearer the line became. Not just a slab, a structure. Bruno stepped closer, careful with his footing, and lowered his nose to the exposed edge. He sniffed once, then shifted to the side, giving Raymond room again. Raymond followed the line with his hands, tracing where it disappeared back under the mud. It didn't curve. It didn't break. It ran straight. Toward the creek. His jaw tightened slightly. "All right," he said, more to himself than the dog. He grabbed the second shovel and began working along the direction of the line, clearing a narrow path, just enough to expose the edge of the buried structure. The mud gave slowly, but once it started, it didn't stop. Water seeped in around his hands, thin at first, then more consistent. It wasn't pooling, it was feeding into the narrow gap he was uncovering, drawing down. Raymond paused, watching it. The surface didn't lie. It leaned, pulled, followed the same direction he'd marked the day before. He sat back on his heels, breathing steady, eyes fixed on the small current forming beneath the mud. "That's where you go," he said quietly. Bruno's tail moved once. Not a wag, just acknowledgement. By mid-morning, Raymond had cleared nearly 10 feet of the line. Enough to see it clearly now. A culvert. Old. Stone-set, hand-built, the kind that predated modern drainage work. The edges were worn, but the alignment was precise. Whoever had built it knew exactly what they were doing, and someone else had buried it. Not intentionally, maybe. Time, flood, debris. Didn't matter. The result was the same. Blocked. Raymond stood, stretching his back slowly, eyes scanning the rest of the hollow. He could see it now, not just where the water sat, but where it wanted to go. The entire field wasn't the problem. Just this break, this choke point. He wiped his hands on his jeans and looked toward the creek again. Then back at the line. 60 feet, maybe a little more. He could clear it. Not all at once, not fast, but he could do it. Bruno moved ahead along the line, stopping every few feet, looking back to make sure Raymond followed. Same pattern, same confirmation. Raymond picked up the shovel again. This time, he didn't test. He committed. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the cold. The hollow shifted with it, the surface losing its early stillness, showing more of the uneven ground beneath. Raymond worked in sections. Clear, check, move. Each foot of progress changed the way the water moved. Not dramatically. Not enough for anyone passing by to notice. But Raymond noticed. A slight drop here. A change in color there. Movement. By early afternoon, the first real trickle appeared. Not on the surface. Below it. A narrow stream slipping through the exposed stone, moving toward the creek with a purpose it hadn't had in years. Raymond crouched again, watching it. No rush, no force. Just steady. He nodded once. "That's right," he said. Bruno lay down beside the line, head resting near the flow, ears still tracking the surroundings. Watching. Guarding. The sound of an engine broke the rhythm. Raymond didn't look up right away. He finished clearing the section he was on, then stood slowly, turning toward the road. Nathan Crowley's truck sat at the fence line again. This time, he didn't call out. He just stood there, arms resting on the top rail, watching. Raymond met his gaze for a moment, then looked back down at the work. Nathan stepped over the fence without asking. Walked partway into the field, boots sinking slightly with each step. "You're cutting it," he said finally. Not a question. Raymond didn't answer. Nathan stopped a few yards away, looking down at the exposed stone, then at the thin stream of water moving through it. he frowned. That wasn't in the report, he said. No. Nathan glanced back toward the road, then at the rest of the hollow. You think that's enough? He asked. Raymond drove the shovel into the ground again, pulling up another section of mud. It's where it starts. Nathan watched him for a long second. Then he shook his head slightly. Or where you waste your time, he said. Raymond didn't respond. Nathan exhaled, stepping back. Water's been sitting here longer than you've been alive, he added. You're not going to change that with a shovel. Raymond paused, just for a second. Then he looked up. Water doesn't decide, he said. It follows. Nathan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A small shift, uncertain. He looked back at the line one more time, then turned and walked away without another word. The truck engine started a moment later, then faded. Raymond stood there, listening until the sound was gone. Then he went back to work. The sun moved across the sky. The line extended. The water followed. Not much, but enough. The second morning came colder. A thin layer of frost clung to the higher ground, silvering the reeds and stiffening the mud just enough to hold weight for a few extra seconds before giving way. Raymond stepped into the hollow before sunrise again, moving along the line he had already begun to open. The exposed stone had changed overnight. Not the shape, the sound. There was a faint, steady trickle now, quieter than the wind, but constant. Water slipping through the culvert, not pooling, not resisting. Moving. Raymond crouched beside it, watching the narrow current thread its way along the cleared channel. He didn't smile. Didn't need to. Bruno stood just behind him, ears angled toward the tree line, listening past the sound of water, past the shifting grass. Always one layer further. Raymond reached down, brushing away a small collapse of mud that had fallen back into the line overnight. The flow adjusted instantly, widening slightly, finding its path again. Keep it open, he muttered. Bruno shifted his stance, then moved ahead along the line, stopping where the mud thickened again. Raymond followed. By mid-morning, the rhythm had set in. Cut, clear, check, move. Raymond worked with the same deliberate pace he'd carried through years of field operations, never rushing past a detail, never assuming something would hold if he hadn't tested it himself. The shovel struck earth in steady intervals, each impact controlled, measured. He didn't dig wide, didn't need to. The line was already there. He was just uncovering it, revealing it. Bruno moved in short arcs around him, never straying too far, always circling back to the line. At one point, the dog stopped abruptly, body stiff, head snapping toward the ridge. Raymond froze instantly. No question, no hesitation. He lowered the shovel slowly, listening. Wind. Dry leaves shifting. Then, nothing. No engine. No footsteps. Bruno held the position for another few seconds, then relaxed just enough to signal clear. Raymond picked the shovel back up. Keep watching, he said quietly. Bruno resumed his patrol. By noon, the channel had extended nearly halfway to the creek. The ground here was different, heavier, more compacted. The shovel didn't sink as easily. The mud clung tighter, resisting the blade. Raymond adjusted his angle, using the edge to break through instead of forcing straight down. When the shovel struck something solid again, the sound was sharper this time. Stone. But not the same as before. Larger. He cleared around it carefully, revealing a section where the culvert had partially collapsed inward. The stone lining had shifted, narrowing the channel to a gap barely wide enough for water to seep through. Raymond leaned closer, studying it. This was the choke point, the place where everything backed up. He ran his fingers along the edge, feeling the pressure of water behind it. Not much, but constant. He sat back on his heels, considering. Then he stood, walked back to the truck, and returned with a pry bar. Bruno watched him the entire time. No movement wasted. Raymond set the bar into the gap, testing the resistance. The stone didn't budge at first. He adjusted his footing, repositioned the bar, and applied steady pressure. Not forceful, not sudden. Measured. The stone shifted. Just a fraction. Water pushed harder against the opening, slipping through faster now, carrying bits of silt with it. Raymond eased off, letting it settle. Then he pressed again. The stone gave another inch. A dull crack echoed through the hollow as part of the collapsed section loosened. Raymond stepped back immediately. Waited. Water surged through the gap, not violently, but with intent. The narrow trickle widened, deepened, finding the space it had been denied. Mud along the line began to soften, then sink, the surface adjusting to the new flow. Raymond watched it, eyes steady. "Easy," he said under his breath. Bruno stayed back, body low, watching the change with the same focus he gave everything else. The flow didn't break, didn't flood. It stabilized. Raymond nodded once. That's it. The rest of the afternoon moved differently, faster. Not in his pace, but in the land's response. Each section he cleared now connected to the last. Water that had been sitting in isolated patches began to lean toward the channel, subtle at first, then more noticeable. The surface lost its stillness. It shifted. Raymond moved along the line, widening certain sections, reinforcing others with stones he pulled from the edges of the field. Nothing elaborate, just enough to keep the path open. Bruno followed, stopping whenever the flow hesitated, glancing back until Raymond caught up and corrected it. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. By late afternoon, the channel reached the final stretch before the creek. The land dipped slightly here, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. Raymond stood at the edge, shovel in hand, looking at the last 10 feet. This was the outlet. If he cut it wrong, the whole system would stall again. He set the shovel down, pulled the notebook from his jacket, flipped to the page. He traced the line with his finger, then looked back at the land. 8 inches, maybe less. That was all that separated standing water from flow. Raymond stepped forward, testing the ground. Bruno moved beside him, close now, no longer ranging ahead. The dog knew this part mattered. Raymond drove the shovel into the earth. The first cut was shallow, testing. The second went deeper. He worked the angle carefully, shaving the soil down instead of digging straight through. Each pass lowered the outlet slightly. Measured. Controlled. On the fourth cut, the ground gave way. Not dramatically, just enough. Water from the channel leaned forward, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then moved. A thin stream slipped over the edge and into the creek. Raymond froze, watched. The flow held, didn't stop, didn't back up. It continued, steady, pulling more water behind it. The surface of the hollow shifted again, small ripples forming where none had been before. Raymond exhaled slowly. Bruno stepped forward, sniffing the new outlet, then looked back at Raymond. For the first time, his tail moved more than a single beat. Not excitement. Recognition. Raymond rested one hand briefly on the dog's shoulder. "Good work," he said. The light was fading when the first real change became visible from a distance. A section of the hollow that had held water all day now showed patches of exposed ground, dark, wet, but no longer submerged. Raymond stood at the edge of the field, looking back over the line he had cut. 60 feet. Maybe a little more. Not wide, not deep, but enough. Behind him, the road carried the distant sound of a passing truck. He didn't turn. Didn't need to. The land was already answering. And this time, it wasn't holding back. By morning, the change had a sound. Not loud, not enough to carry past the tree line, but steady, like a low breath moving through the hollow where there had been nothing but stillness before. Raymond stood at the edge of the cut with his hands resting on the shovel handle, listening. The channel held. Water slid along the stone, over the outlet, and into the creek without hesitation. No backing up, no pooling, just movement. Bruno stepped ahead, nose low, tracking the flow from one section to the next. He paused where the ground dipped, watching the surface shift as thin streams began to connect. Patches that had been separate now leaning toward the same direction. Raymond followed, slower. He wasn't watching the water. He was watching the land respond to it. The difference showed in small ways first. Edges of pooled sections softened, losing that hard line where water had sat too long. Mud that had been slick the day before now held a shape when stepped on, even if it still sank under pressure. Raymond tested it with his boot. Heel first, then weight. It held for half a second longer than it had yesterday. That was enough. By mid-morning, the hollow no longer looked the same from where the road cut across the ridge. A man driving past slowed without meaning to, then slowed again. The surface didn't reflect the sky the way it had before. It broke in places, dark patches interrupting the mirror of water, lines forming where none had been. He didn't stop, but he noticed. Raymond didn't look up when the truck pulled onto the gravel shoulder near the fence line. He heard it, felt the shift in sound before the engine even cut. Bruno did the same. Head up, body angled toward the road. Raymond kept working. One more section. Clear the edge. Check the flow. Only then did he straighten. Nathan Crowley stood by the fence again. But he didn't step over this time. He stayed where the ground was firm, boots planted, arms resting on the top rail as he watched the hollow. Longer this time. No comment. Raymond wiped his hands on his jeans, then walked toward him. Not all the way. Close enough. Nathan nodded toward the field. That wasn't there yesterday. Raymond didn't answer right away. He turned slightly, looking back at the channel. No. Nathan studied the land again, eyes tracking the faint lines where water now moved instead of sitting. You didn't dig that whole thing in one day, he said. 2. Nathan let out a breath through his nose, not quite a laugh. That's not fixing it, he said. That's changing it. Raymond shrugged, slight. Same thing. Nathan didn't respond immediately. He shifted his weight, boots grinding lightly into the gravel. Water'll come back, he said finally. Always does. Raymond met his eyes. Only if it has nowhere to go. Silence held between them for a few seconds. Not tense, but not easy either. Nathan looked back at the field, then down toward the creek where the outlet fed a thin, steady line of movement. "You're going to run into trouble with the county," he said. "They don't like people moving water around." Raymond nodded once. "I'm not moving it," he said. "Just letting it go where it already wanted to." Nathan's jaw shifted slightly. He looked like he was about to say something else, then didn't. He pushed off the fence instead, stepping back toward his truck. "Doesn't matter what you call it," he said. "People are going to have something to say." Raymond didn't follow him with his eyes. He didn't need to. The truck door shut. The engine turned over. Gravel kicked as Nathan pulled away. The next visitor came just after noon. Eli Turner, this time with a clipboard. He walked the fence line first, not stepping in, not speaking, just watching. Raymond finished the section he was on before acknowledging him. "Morning," Eli said. Raymond nodded. Eli stepped through the fence carefully, testing the ground before committing his weight. He moved slower than Nathan had, less confident, more aware of what the land could do. He stopped at the edge of the channel, looked down, looked up, then back down again. "That's new," he said. Raymond said nothing. Eli crouched, examining the exposed stone, the way the water moved through it. "You didn't install this," he said. "No." "You uncovered it." "Yes." Eli exhaled slowly. "And the outlet?" Raymond pointed. "Down there." Eli followed the line with his eyes, tracing the path from the culvert to the creek. He didn't write anything. Not yet. "You're lowering the water table," he said finally. Raymond didn't correct him, didn't confirm it either. Eli stood, looking out over the hollow again. "It's not supposed to drain this way," he said. Raymond tilted his head slightly. "Worked before." Eli glanced at him. "You don't know that." Raymond held his gaze. "Someone did." Eli looked back down at the stone, at the precision of it, at the way the channel lined up with the natural slope, even if the surface didn't show it clearly anymore. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then straightened. "I'll have to report this," he said. Raymond nodded. "Figured." Eli shifted the clipboard in his hand, but still didn't write. "Water's already moving," he added. Raymond looked back at the field. "Yeah." Eli followed his gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hollow wasn't quiet anymore. It carried sound now. Soft, constant, alive. Eli tapped the edge of the clipboard once against his leg, then turned toward the fence. "I'll be back," he said. Raymond didn't respond. Eli stepped out, careful again with his footing, and made his way back to his truck. This time, when he drove off, he didn't accelerate hard. He went slow, like he was thinking. By late afternoon, the changes were no longer subtle. The lowest section of the hollow had begun to show ground, not dry, but visible. Dark soil pushing through where water had stood for years. Raymond walked that section slowly, boots sinking but not disappearing. Each step left a print that held its shape for a second before softening. Better than yesterday. Better than it had any right to be. Bruno moved ahead, stepping lightly, choosing firmer spots without hesitation. He paused once, looking back, then shifted direction slightly, guiding Raymond along a line that avoided the worst of the soft ground. Raymond followed, trusted it. He always had. The sun dropped behind the ridge, casting the hollow into shadow again. But it wasn't the same shadow. The surface didn't reflect it evenly anymore. It broke, moved, changed. Raymond stood at the edge of the field, looking out over the work. Not measuring now, not planning, just watching. Behind him, the road carried the faint sound of another passing vehicle. This time, it slowed, then stopped. Raymond didn't turn right away. He didn't need to see who it was to know what they were looking at. The hollow wasn't what it had been. Not anymore. And people were starting to see it. The trucks didn't stop long. Not yet. They slowed just enough for the drivers to look, really look, then rolled on, leaving dust hanging in the air behind them. By the third day, the pattern held. Morning, late afternoon, sometimes just before dark. Same reaction. A second glance, then a longer one. Raymond didn't acknowledge any of it. He worked. The hollow continued to change in ways that didn't announce themselves all at once. Water levels dropped in inches, not feet. Patches of ground appeared and held, then widened, connecting into strips of dark, workable soil that hadn't seen open air in years. The channel held steady. Raymond checked it twice a day, morning, evening. He walked its length, clearing any collapse, resetting stones where needed, watching for places where the flow slowed or split. Bruno stayed close now, not ranging as far. His patrol had shifted from searching to holding, guarding the line. Raymond noticed that too. On the fourth morning, Raymond didn't bring the shovel. He brought the sacks. Bruno watched as he set them down at the edge of the field, nose twitching slightly at the unfamiliar scent. Raymond untied the first one, pulling the fabric open just enough to look inside. Roots. Thin, pale, tangled. Ginseng. He checked them quickly, fingers moving with care, then closed the sack again. The second bag held something different. Seeds. Small, dark, uneven. Watercress. Raymond set both aside, then stepped out into the field. He didn't head for the driest ground. He followed the water. The channel had created a natural line now, a shallow path where moisture held but didn't pool. The soil there was soft, rich, darkened by years of trapped organic matter breaking down without air. Raymond crouched, pressing his hand into it. It gave, but not too much. Held. He nodded once. "This'll do." Bruno moved ahead, stepping lightly across the uneven ground, then stopping a few feet down the line. He looked back, ears forward, waiting. Raymond followed. Same pattern, same quiet communication. Planting wasn't fast. Raymond worked the same way he had cut the channel. Measured, intentional. He used a small hand tool to open narrow rows along the edge of the water line. Not deep, just enough to settle the seeds and roots into the soil. Ginseng went where the shade held longest, beneath the thin canopy of trees that bordered the hollow. Watercress followed the channel itself, where the flow stayed consistent but gentle. Not flooding, not dry. Balanced. Raymond spaced each section carefully, adjusting for the way the ground shifted under his feet. No wasted movement. No guesswork. Bruno moved alongside him, occasionally stepping ahead to check a section before Raymond reached it, then pausing until he caught up. Once, the dog stopped completely, nose low to the ground, body tense. Raymond froze. Same response as always. He scanned the tree line, listened. Nothing moved. Bruno held the position for another few seconds, then relaxed, stepping aside. Raymond moved forward again. No words. By midday, the first line was set. Not wide, not enough for anyone to call it a field, but enough to see the pattern forming. Raymond stood at the edge of the planted section, looking down the line. Water moved beside it. Soil held beneath it. It would take time. He knew that. Time didn't bother him. The first real interruption came just after he started the second section. A truck pulled in hard, gravel scattering under the tires. Raymond didn't look up right away. He finished placing the root in his hand, covered it, pressed the soil down lightly. Then he stood. Nathan Crowley stepped out of his truck, not waiting this time. He walked straight into the field, boots sinking slightly with each step, ignoring it. "You're planting," Nathan said. Raymond nodded once. Nathan looked down at the rows, then back at the channel. "That's not corn," he said. "No." "Not beans?" "No." Nathan crouched, picking up a small clump of soil, letting it fall through his fingers. "You're not fixing this land," he said. "You're changing what you expect from it." Raymond didn't respond. Nathan stood again, looking out over the hollow. "You think this is going to pay?" he asked. Raymond met his eyes. "It already is." Nathan's expression shifted slightly. Not agreement, not dismissal. Something in between. He glanced toward the road where another truck had slowed, then back at the field. "You've got people watching now," he said. Raymond shrugged, slight. "They'll get bored." Nathan shook his head. "Not if you're right." Raymond said nothing. Nathan stepped back, turning toward his truck. "Just remember," he added over his shoulder, "being right doesn't mean they'll let you be." He climbed in and drove off without waiting for a response. The word stayed longer than Raymond expected. Not as a warning, as a fact. He'd heard it before. Different place, different context, same meaning. Being right didn't stop pressure. Sometimes it brought more. Raymond went back to work. The afternoon passed in quiet. Rows extended. The pattern deepened. Watercress seeds settled into the damp edges of the channel, barely visible once placed. Ginseng roots disappeared beneath the shaded soil, leaving no sign of what had been set there. From a distance, it didn't look like anything. Not yet. Just disturbed ground, lines in the mud. Nothing anyone would bet on. By evening, the light cut low across the hollow again, casting long shadows that stretched along the channel. Raymond stood at the edge, looking over what he'd done. The water moved, the ground held, the rows waited. Bruno stood beside him, body relaxed but alert, eyes scanning the edges of the field. Then, without warning, the dog's posture changed. Sharp, immediate. Head snapped toward the far side of the hollow. Raymond followed the movement, turning just enough to catch the shift in the grass near the tree line. Not wind. Too focused. He didn't move, didn't call out, just watched. The grass stilled. Nothing came out of it. No figure, no sound. But the sense of it lingered. Bruno didn't relax, not right away. Raymond reached down, resting a hand briefly on the dog's neck. "Easy," he said. Bruno held the tension for a few more seconds, then let it go. But not completely. Night came slower this time, not quieter. The hollow carried sound now. Water moving through the channel, Soft, constant, alive. Raymond gathered his tools, stacking them near the edge of the field instead of bringing them back to the house. Less distance, less time. Bruno stayed close as they walked back toward the truck, glancing once more toward the tree line before climbing in. Raymond didn't start the engine right away. He sat there, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the faint sound of water behind them. It hadn't been there before. Now it was. Not much, but enough to change everything. The first night it happened, Raymond didn't wake up all at once. It came in layers. A shift in the air. A sound that didn't belong. Metal. Light, but wrong. His eyes opened before his body moved. The room was dark, just a faint line of gray at the window. The kind of dark that made shapes uncertain, edges soft. Then, clink. Not inside. Outside. Raymond was already sitting up. No hesitation. No confusion. His feet hit the floor without noise. His hand moved to the side of the bed, not reaching for anything that wasn't there anymore, but remembering where it used to be. Bruno was up before he reached the door. Silent, rigid, facing the same direction. Raymond didn't turn on a light, didn't reach for one. He moved to the window instead, stopping just short of it, shifting his angle to see out without being seen. The yard sat still, but not empty. A shape moved low near the line of tools he'd left by the field. Too controlled to be an animal. Too deliberate. Raymond stepped back from the window. "Stay," he whispered. Bruno didn't move, but the dog's body leaned forward slightly, every muscle drawn tight. Raymond moved to the door, opened it slow. No creak. He stepped out into the dark, letting the night settle around him before moving forward. Each step placed. Heel, then toe. Quiet. The way he'd learned to move when the ground itself could give you away. The hollow lay ahead, darker than the sky above it, the faint sound of water still threading through the channel. Then, another sound. Closer. A dull scrape. Metal against stone. Raymond stopped. Listened. There, near the channel. He angled left, using the line of trees for cover, moving along the edge instead of straight in. Bruno followed without being called. Lower. Closer. The shape came into view as Raymond reached the last stretch of shadow. A man, bent over the channel, working fast, not digging, breaking. The pry bar in his hands drove down into the stone lining, levering it loose, collapsing sections inward, blocking it. Raymond didn't call out, didn't warn. He stepped forward just enough for the man to hear him. "Stop!" The man froze, turned. For a second, neither of them moved. Then the man swung. Not wild, not panicked. A direct strike with the bar aimed low, trying to catch Raymond off balance. Raymond stepped back, just enough for it to miss. Bruno didn't wait. He moved, fast, low. He hit the man from the side, jaws closing on the sleeve, not the arm. Controlled, trained, enough to stop the motion without tearing through. The man shouted, twisting, trying to pull free. The pry bar dropped into the mud. Raymond closed the distance in 2 steps. He grabbed the man's shoulder, turned him, and drove him down into the ground. Not hard enough to break anything, just enough to end the fight. "Don't," Raymond said, low and even. The man stilled, breathing hard. Bruno held position, grip steady, waiting. Raymond looked down at him. Young, mid-30s maybe. Face tight, eyes wide. Not with rage, but with something closer to fear. Raymond eased the pressure slightly. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man didn't answer. Didn't have to. Raymond already knew. He shifted his weight, keeping control without escalating. "You're done," he said. "Walk away." The man hesitated, then nodded once. Raymond stepped back. Bruno released immediately, retreating to Raymond's side without a second command. The man scrambled to his feet, slipping once in the mud, then catching himself. He didn't look back as he moved toward the trees, disappearing into the dark the same way he'd come. The hollow went quiet again. But not the same quiet. Raymond stood there, watching the spot where the man had been. Then he looked down at the channel. Several sections had collapsed. Not fully, but enough to slow the flow. Water pooled again in places that had been clearing. Raymond exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. He crouched, reaching for the fallen pry bar. Then he saw it, dark against the mud. Bruno's leg. A thin line at first, then more. Blood. The dog stood steady, but his weight had shifted, subtle, almost hidden. Raymond's hand tightened around the bar. "Come here," he said. Bruno stepped forward without hesitation. Raymond knelt, running his hands along the leg carefully, checking the wound. Not deep, but enough. A glancing strike. Could have been worse. Should have been worse. Raymond pressed his hand lightly over the cut, steadying the bleeding. "You're all right," he said, voice low. Bruno didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just held still, watching him. Raymond tore a strip from the inside of his sleeve, wrapping it tight enough to hold, not enough to cut circulation. Field work. Same as always. When he finished, he rested his hand on the dog's shoulder for a second longer than necessary. "Good work," he said. Bruno's tail moved once. Raymond stood, looking over the damage. The channel wasn't gone, not yet. But the flow had slowed, changed. He could hear it, feel it. He set the pry bar aside and picked up the shovel again. Didn't wait, didn't go back. He started clearing. Right there, in the dark. Bruno stayed beside him, weight shifted but steady, watching the edges while Raymond worked. The rhythm came back quickly, clear, check, reset. Mud gave way, stone realigned. Water began to move again, slow at first, then stronger. Raymond worked until the line held, until the sound of the flow returned to what it had been before. Only then did he stop. He stood there, breathing steady, looking down the length of the channel. Someone had tried to shut it down, not out of curiosity, not by accident, on purpose. Raymond wiped his hands on his jeans, looked out toward the tree line. "You're gonna have to do better than that," he said quietly. Bruno stood beside him, ears forward, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the hollow. This time, he didn't relax. Not completely. Not anymore. Morning came gray and quiet, like the land was holding its breath after the night. Raymond didn't sleep again. He sat on the edge of the bed until the first light showed through the window, hands resting on his knees, listening to the house settle. Not the same sounds as before. Not the same silence either. Something had changed. Not outside. Inside. Bruno lay near the door, head up, eyes open. He hadn't moved much through the night. The bandage on his leg held, darkened slightly but not soaked through. When Raymond stood, the dog rose with him. No hesitation, no sign of pain beyond the shift in weight that only someone watching closely would catch. Raymond noticed. He always did. "Let's see it," he said quietly. He knelt, unwrapped the bandage just enough to check the wound. Clean, shallow, already closing at the edges. Good. He rewrapped it tighter this time, securing it with a knot that wouldn't slip. Bruno didn't flinch, didn't look away. Raymond rested his hand there for a second, then stood. "All right." The hollow looked different in the morning. Not just drained, settled. The channel still held, water moving in a steady line toward the creek. But the surrounding ground had shifted again overnight. More surface exposed, more patches connecting. And the rows. They were there now. Still faint, still easy to miss if you didn't know where to look. But they had shape, structure. Raymond walked the line first, checking every section of the channel. Where the damage had been done, he reinforced it, resetting stones, pressing mud back into place, guiding the flow where it needed to go. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Bruno followed close, staying just off his left side, watching the edges. Not searching anymore. Guarding. By mid-morning, the first sign appeared. Not dramatic. Not something you could point to and say it had changed everything. Just green. A faint line along the damp edge of the channel where the watercress had taken hold. Tiny leaves pushing up through the soil, barely visible unless you were close enough to see the difference in color. Raymond crouched beside it. Didn't touch it. Just looked. "That's fast," he said. Bruno lowered his head beside him, sniffing the ground, then looked back up. Raymond nodded once. "Yeah." The ginseng wouldn't show yet. He knew that. It would take time. Months, maybe longer. But the watercress, that was immediate. Responsive. Proof. Raymond stood, looking down the length of the line where the green had started to spread, thin but consistent. Then he went back to work. The first car stopped just after noon. Not a truck this time. A sedan. Older. Clean. It pulled off to the side of the road and stayed there longer than the others had. Raymond saw it. Didn't stop what he was doing. A minute passed. Then 2. The driver didn't get out. Just sat there, watching. Bruno noticed. Head up. Eyes locked. Raymond finished the row he was on, stood, and turned slowly toward the road. The car pulled away. Not fast, just enough to leave. By afternoon, more green showed. Not much, but enough to connect the first patches into something that held its own shape against the dark soil. The water carried small fragments of it downstream, spreading it further along the edge. Raymond adjusted where needed, guiding the flow, making sure it didn't wash too much away too fast. Balance. That was the key. Always had been. Eli Turner came back just before the sun dropped. No clipboard this time. No formal posture. He walked the fence line again, then stepped through, slower than before. More careful. Raymond didn't greet him. Didn't need to. Eli walked straight to the channel, stopped, looked down, then followed the line with his eyes, taking in the movement, the exposed ground, the faint green along the edges. He didn't speak right away. Raymond let him take it in. Finally, Eli exhaled. "It's draining," he said. Raymond nodded once. Eli crouched, touching the soil lightly, then pulling his hand back, examining the moisture. It shouldn't be, he added. Raymond tilted his head slightly. It is. Eli glanced up at him, something in his expression shifting. Not resistance, not yet acceptance. Something closer to recalculating. What did you find? He asked. Raymond pointed toward the upper line. Culvert. Eli stood, looking in that direction. Buried? Yes. Eli's jaw tightened slightly. He looked back at the channel, at the water, at the green, then out over the rest of the hollow. I walked this field twice, he said, in wet conditions. Raymond didn't respond. Eli let out a breath. I wrote it off, he added. Raymond shrugged, slight. Didn't walk it far enough. Eli nodded once, didn't argue, didn't defend. He just stood there, watching the water move. Then he said something quieter. I didn't measure the outlet. Raymond looked at him. No. Eli let that sit. Then he looked down again at the line of watercress, the faint green pushing through where there had been nothing but standing water weeks before. What is that? He asked. Watercress. Eli frowned slightly. That'll grow here? Raymond looked back at the channel. It already is. Eli didn't write anything, didn't take notes. He just stood there for a long moment, then turned toward the fence. I'll be back, he said. Raymond didn't answer. Eli paused at the fence, one hand resting on the top rail. You're going to have people asking questions, he added. Raymond nodded. They already are. Eli studied him for a second. Then he left. Evening settled in slower this time. The hollow didn't fall silent the way it used to. The water carried sound now. Soft, constant, alive. Raymond stood at the edge of the field, looking out over the changes. The green was still small, still fragile, but it was there, and it was spreading. Bruno stood beside him. Weight still shifted slightly off the injured leg, but steady, eyes scanning the perimeter. Not searching, watching, holding. Raymond let his gaze move across the field, following the lines he had cut, the places where water now moved instead of sitting. It didn't look like much, not to anyone passing by, not yet. But it wasn't what it had been. Not completely. Not anymore. And that was enough. The first truck didn't come to look. It came to stop. Raymond heard it before he saw it. The heavier engine, the slower approach. The kind that didn't pass by unless it had a reason. Gravel shifted under weight as it pulled off near the fence line, then idled instead of cutting. Bruno's head came up. Not tense. Focused. Raymond finished pressing soil around the last row he'd been working, brushed his hands clean, and stood. He didn't rush, didn't change pace, just turned. The truck door opened. Eli Turner stepped out first. This time, he wasn't alone. Two men followed. One older, gray at the temples, wearing a county badge clipped to his belt. The other carried a measuring rod and a small case, survey gear. Raymond watched them walk the fence line, talking low, not looking at him yet. Not until they were ready. Bruno moved to Raymond's side, standing just ahead of him, body aligned with the approach. Raymond rested one hand lightly on the dog's back. Easy. Bruno didn't move. They stepped through the fence carefully. Not like before, not casual. Measured. The older man looked out over the hollow first, then down at the channel, then back out again. He took it in without speaking. Eli stayed a step behind him, watching the same lines Raymond had been following for days now. The surveyor set his case down and began assembling the level without being told. Raymond didn't speak, didn't offer anything. He just stood there. Let them see it. The older man finally stepped forward. "You're Hale," he said. Raymond nodded. "Raymond Hale." The man returned the nod. "County office," he said. "Name's Walker." Raymond didn't ask for more. Walker looked down at the channel again. "Eli says you uncovered a culvert." "Yes." Walker shifted his weight, boots pressing into the ground, testing it without making it obvious. "Where does it run?" Raymond pointed. "Starts up there, runs straight to the creek." Walker followed the line with his eyes. Then he looked at the surveyor. "Get me the elevation on that outlet." The man nodded, already moving, setting the tripod, adjusting the level. Raymond watched. Didn't interfere. Didn't explain. Bruno's ears flicked once toward the ridge, then settled again. Still watching. It took time. Measurements always did. The surveyor moved back and forth along the line, calling out numbers quietly to Eli, who wrote them down without speaking. Walker stood still, watching the land, not the men. Reading it. The same way Raymond had, but later. Too late to be first. When they finished, Eli looked up from the clipboard, then at Walker. Walker didn't ask for the numbers. He already knew. He looked at Raymond. "How much did you drop it?" Raymond shrugged slightly. "Just enough." Walker's mouth tightened. 6 inches, Eli said quietly. "Maybe a little more at the outlet." Walker nodded once. Then he looked back out over the hollow, at the ground, at the water, at the green. It was no longer subtle. The watercress had spread along the channel, filling in the edges, holding the soil in place where it might have washed out. The exposed ground had expanded, connecting into strips that could carry weight. Not dry, but workable. Alive. Walker exhaled slowly. "This should have been in the original report," he said. Eli didn't answer. Didn't need to. Walker looked at him anyway. "You didn't measure the outlet." Eli shook his head once. "No." Walker nodded. Then he looked back at Raymond. "You knew." Raymond didn't respond. Walker let that sit. Then he stepped closer to the channel, crouching, running his fingers lightly over the stone lining. Old work. Solid work. Buried. Missed. He stood again. "What are you growing?" he asked. Raymond gestured down the line. "Watercress?" Walker raised an eyebrow slightly. "And the rest?" "Ginseng." Walker looked out over the shaded edge where the trees met the hollow, then back at the channel, then at the numbers in Eli's hand. He didn't argue, didn't dismiss. He just stood there, recalculating something that had already been decided once. A second truck pulled up behind the first, then another. Not county, local. Men stepped out, slower this time, staying near the fence, watching. Nathan Crowley stood among them. Not at the front, not speaking, just watching. Raymond saw him, didn't acknowledge him. Nathan didn't expect him to. Walker turned slightly, noticing the gathering at the fence. He looked back at Raymond. "You've got attention," he said. Raymond nodded once. "So do you." Walker almost smiled. Almost. He took the clipboard from Eli, looked at it once, then handed it back. File an amendment, he said. Correct the assessment. Eli hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. Walker looked at Raymond again. This doesn't make it easy, he said. It just makes it possible. Raymond met his eyes. That's enough. Walker held the look for a second longer, then nodded. He turned, stepping back toward the fence, the others following. The surveyor packed his gear. Eli lingered a moment longer. He looked at the channel, at the water, at the green, then at Raymond. I measured soil, he said quietly. Raymond didn't respond. Eli glanced back at the numbers in his hand, then back at the land. You measured water. Raymond said nothing. He didn't need to. Eli nodded once. Then he left. The trucks didn't leave right away. They stayed along the road, engines off, men standing by the fence, looking out over something they hadn't expected to see. Not here. Not on this ground. Nathan stood longer than the others. He didn't step forward, didn't cross the fence. He just watched. Then finally, he turned and walked back to his truck without saying a word. By evening, the hollow was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. It held something now. Recognition. Not loud, not spoken, but there. Raymond stood at the edge of the field, looking out over the work. The channel held. The water moved. The green spread. Behind him, Bruno lowered himself carefully to the ground, favoring the injured leg, but steady, eyes still tracking the perimeter. Guarding. Even now. Raymond looked down at him, then back at the land. No one had apologized. No one had needed to. They had seen it, and that was enough. The hollow didn't go quiet after that day. It changed pace, not faster, steadier. The kind of steady that doesn't draw attention anymore, because it stops being new. It becomes expected. Summer settled in slow. The green along the channel thickened first, spreading from a line into a band, then into something that held shape even when the water shifted. The watercress didn't fight the current. It worked with it, anchoring where it needed to, letting go where it didn't. Raymond adjusted it only when necessary. Never too much, never all at once. The ground followed. Sections that had been soft enough to swallow a boot in early spring now held weight without complaint. Not dry, not the kind of land that cracked under heat, but stable, workable, alive. People stopped slowing down. They started stopping. At first, just one or two, then more. They didn't cross the fence, didn't need to. They stood along the road, hands resting on tailgates, watching the field the way you watch something that doesn't match what you thought you knew. Raymond didn't go to them, didn't explain. He worked. That was enough. The first harvest wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. Raymond cut the watercress in sections, careful not to take too much from any one line. He bundled it the same way he'd done other work his whole life. Tight, clean, efficient. Bruno stayed close, moving slower now. The leg had healed. Mostly. But the weight shift remained, subtle, permanent. Raymond noticed. He always did. Easy, he said once when Bruno moved too fast. The dog slowed, stayed beside him. The truck from Asheville came in late July. Not local. Clean. Purposeful. The driver stepped out, took one look at the channel, the growth, the structure of it, and didn't ask what it was. He asked how much. Raymond told him. No negotiation, no explanation. Just numbers. The man nodded, wrote it down, and said he'd be back. He was. Every week after that. The ginseng stayed hidden longer. That was its nature. Raymond checked it without uncovering it, reading the soil, the spacing, the way the shade held through the day. It didn't need attention. It needed time. He gave it both. Eli came back once, then again. Not with a clipboard, not with a report. He walked the field the way Raymond had at the beginning, slow, deliberate, reading instead of assuming. They spoke once, brief. You changed the assessment, Raymond said. Eli nodded. Should have done it the first time. Raymond didn't answer. Eli looked out over the channel. The outlet measurement, he added. We're making it standard now. Raymond glanced at him. Eli shrugged, slight. Should have been. That was all. Nathan didn't come as often. When he did, he stayed by the fence. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Once, late in the season, he nodded toward the field. Raymond returned it. That was the conversation. Years move differently out here. Not counted in days, in cycles. Water rose, water fell. The channel held. Sometimes it needed clearing, silt building up along the edges, vegetation creeping in where it shouldn't. Raymond handled it the same way every time. Early, quiet, before it became a problem. Bruno followed him on those mornings, slower now, but still watching the edges, still scanning the tree line like something might come out of it if he stopped paying attention. He never stopped. The machine in the shed started on the second pull. Every time. Raymond kept it that way. Not because he needed it every day, because he might. There was a difference. He ran it once a month, same as always, letting the engine warm through, listening to the rhythm settle into something familiar. Bruno would lie nearby, head down, eyes half closed, but never fully asleep. Not while it was running. Not while anything was. One afternoon, late in the fall, a boy from down the road stopped at the fence. Didn't call out. Just stood there, watching. Raymond saw him, finished what he was doing, then walked over. The boy looked up at him. You fixed it, he said. Raymond shook his head slightly. No. The boy frowned. But it works now. Raymond looked out over the field, the channel, the water, the green, then back at the boy. It always worked, he said. Just didn't have a way through. The boy considered that, then nodded, like it made sense. Maybe it did. Bruno lay down beside the channel, closer than he used to, resting where the ground stayed cool and damp. He didn't move as fast anymore. Didn't need to. He had learned the lines, knew where things belonged. Raymond walked the length of the field one more time that day, checking the edges, the flow, the ground. Same as he always did. When he finished, he stood at the outlet, watching the water slip clean into the creek. No hesitation, no resistance. Just movement. He looked down at Bruno. The dog lifted his head, meeting his eyes. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Bruno rested his head back down on the damp soil. The same place he had first marked. The same place where the ground had started to speak, if you knew how to listen. Raymond stood there a while longer. Not thinking, not planning, just watching.
The land didn't need anything else from him right now. It was doing what it was meant to do. Finally, he turned back toward the house, the channel behind him, the field beyond it. Holding, working, remembering. Some things didn't change because you forced them to. They changed because you stopped getting in their way. Raymond reached the porch, stepped up, and paused just long enough to listen. The hollow carried sound now, soft, constant, alive. It would keep doing that, long after he wasn't there to hear it. And that was enough. If you made it all the way here, I want to ask you something simple. Do you think the land was ever really useless? Or did people just stop looking?
Comment 1 if you believe nothing is ever truly wasted. Comment 0 if you think most people give up too early. I read every single comment. And if stories like this mean something to you, quiet strength, second chances, and the kind of loyalty that never leaves, make sure you subscribe. There's another story waiting for you, and it might hit even deeper than this one.